Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here all by my lonesome today, which is perfect for me, perfect for you, obviously, and of course, perfect for Eitan, who's traveling this week. Today, we are talking about challenging authority. And this comes at obviously a perfect time for all of us. That's always the way it works with the way that the Kabbalistic calendar predicts the energy and the opportunities of every week. But as I said last week and probably the week before and the week before that, not only is it perfect for this week, but it's really perfect for this era in human history. And I'm really looking forward to unpacking this with you as we understand not only the opportunity of this week, but also the opportunity for each one individually to address this topic personally and internally on our own. I don't think we've ever really addressed the concept of authority, accepting authority, challenging authority on Weekly Energy Boost. So this is new territory for me as well, not in understanding, but in articulating and sharing and hopefully providing you guys with really the greatest opportunity this week to dig deeper and understand where why it's so hard for us to accept authority mentally, emotionally, and of course spiritually, and how to use the opening this week to create breakthroughs in that area. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast where we provide our listeners with the most practical and powerful tools and teachings from the wisdom of Kabbalah. Every week we end up offering timeless tools and timeless wisdom, but it really comes from the teachings in Kabbalah that show us how to take advantage of the opportunities of the coming week, as well as how to watch out for the pitfalls and not fall into those pitfalls or potholes as they were, where we can inadvertently trip ourselves up without realizing why, and then finding out later from listening to the episode later in the week, it was really meant to be that way, that tripping up. And I feel like that's really the essence of this week. It seems like authority is more of a psychological issue when you look at it at face value. But in preparing for today and even reflecting on my own personal issues, history, understanding, and looking at also over the years the students that I've worked with personally and their issues and how authority pushes buttons for them, it became clear that this is really a unique window to talk about this. And even though I could pull a guest on and talk about something else with them, I really felt that this is the week to break it down and for all of us to have those breakthroughs. So first of all, why is it so hard for us to accept authority? You may be listening and be like, I have no problem with authority. Well, then you can skip this episode. I really don't think you should skip this episode, because the concept of authority in a spiritual sense really comes from a place that you might not believe or might not have considered it before, because the original and ultimate authority is the Creator, right? Is God. And the fact that we interact with authorities in our lives in different ways, shapes, and forms is an extension of the fact that there is an original and ultimate authority in every interaction in our lives. So even when we perceive that we're interacting with a physical authority, if it's a family member, a parent or a grandparent, or maybe it's a manager or a boss, or even a teacher or, a government official, right? We perceive that person is an authority in some area, an expert, if you will, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. But the reason that there is that hierarchy is because there is a spiritual hierarchy. And that's really where this week's teachings come from, and why we have this opportunity this week is in this week's Torah portion as well as Zohar portion. There's an extensive discussion on the hierarchy of authority back then in biblical times, whether it was in the tabernacle or the Holy Temple, but even in the understanding of there's a hierarchy in the angel realm, the angelic realm. There's a hierarchy even within the souls who have completed their correction and are waiting for us people, us human beings, to to finish our correction, that there is always a hierarchy. And hierarchy in Kabbalistic terms doesn't mean better or worse. It means different roles. And that's really, I think, the starting point for us to have this conversation about challenging authority, is that everyone has their unique role. And their unique role comes from not their college degree or their family's social standing or what country they were born in, but rather their tikkun, their soul's commitment to heal and transform what they came to heal and transform and also share with the world. So the spiritual element, of course, that's the starting point, and that's also where we're going to end the conversation. But the spiritual starting point is that part of the reason that there is hierarchy, or there are roles that appear to be above and below, is because that's how the upper worlds are designed. And when you take a deeper dive into the teachings of Kabbalah and what it has to say about the supernal worlds, you understand that what is above and what is below isn't better or worse, it's simply different. In the same way that you look at the human body and you say, well, there's a heart and there's lungs, which one is more important? Oh, wait, but there's the brain. Is the brain or the heart more important? Are the lungs or the brain more important? It's not about more important. Every organ in the body, every person on the planet has a unique role. And the heart doesn't try to do the brain's job. The brain doesn't try to do the lungs' job. And in that reminder for us that in the hierarchy there is harmony and there is flow, it's a reminder to us, right, to understand that authority exists for, again, mental reasons, emotional reasons, and spiritual reasons. Of course, on Weekly Energy Boost, our focus is spiritual, but it's important to acknowledge all of them. And I think when it comes to mental, right, we perceive authority as a potential limitation to our freedom of thinking, our freedom of autonomy, right? Autonomy versus control. No one wants to feel controlled by anyone else. And a lot of times when we feel that sense that our autonomy is being taken away from us or impinged upon, I think in general, we crave a sense of autonomy. I think there's a book called, we've talked about it on the podcast before, it's called Drive, and it really talks about the desires that motivate us, and one of them is autonomy. But at the same time, you can be both autonomous and collaborate or answer to, quote unquote, someone in an authoritative or an expert opinion role, right? I think another challenge that comes up for us mentally, at least, is that there is this desire, or I don't know, maybe we're hardwired to question things that don't align with our experience or our logic. So if authority presents ideas that conflict with our understanding, there is this desire to challenge or resist. I mean, maybe if we don't acknowledge the desire, it appears as skepticism, or it appears as cognitive dissonance, right? When we're thinking one thing, but we're doing another, the result is usually a resentment to that authority, or maybe, I don't know if the word is rebellion. That's maybe the right word, rebellion. And it's interesting because I actually had a meeting with someone earlier today, and she was telling me that even though in their own family and generations back, they're Catholic, their son is resisting, questioning, not accepting, almost to the extent of rebelling against the family's practice. And we were talking about how, in order for someone, and this is also part of my message to everyone who's listening right now, that in order for us to really wholeheartedly embrace a practice, again, it could be religious, it could be spiritual, it could be a fitness practice, it doesn't really matter. We have to choose it. That's where the autonomy piece comes from. You can be both autonomous and follow someone else's guidance, right? When you hire a personal trainer at the gym, do you resent them for telling you what to do? Now, that's not to say that you can't, everybody who tells you what to do is correct, but that perception, and this is again where Kabbalah comes and says, humanity was created as a vessel to receive. To receive from what? The light of the Creator. So one of the fundamental teachings of Kabbalah is that we should be open to receive from anyone. We don't want to shoot the messenger, right? We want to receive the message. And when it comes to authority, there is often that resistance to be told what to do. I mean, I think of myself as a younger person growing up in my parents' home. Even though there's the part of me that knew that they were right, it was also hard for me to admit it when I saw the validity or the value in what they were telling me. And you can really use that. I mean, if you're reflecting on your own journey, I'm sure that you've had many moments in time where initially you resisted what someone was suggesting to you or offering to you, guiding you towards, and eventually you realize, wow, that, I can learn from anyone. I can learn from any experience as well. It's only our ego that prevents us from allowing those lessons and receiving to take place. Now, emotionally, there tend to be other issues, and I think that the mental issues are maybe collective. The emotional issues are unique to the individual, because emotionally, accepting authority requires trust. Some people have trust issues and other people don't. So if authority figures, if you have a tikkun with trust, and in the past authority figures have failed you, disappointed you, let you down, rejected you, etc., resistance becomes a defense mechanism. So in life, you may grow up as, having that experience in your childhood, and then going on to work in a company or in a collaborative experience, a collaborative situation, and you have no reason to resist authority from the particular, let's say your manager or your landlord or what have you, the principal at the school that your kids go to. But because of your past, which if you're new to Weekly Energy Boost, we understand that even though our childhood provides us with the installation of the buttons that are going to get pushed in us as adults, meaning our childhood experiences prepare us to do the spiritual work we need to do as adults, what's installed within us during childhood is a product of our most recent lifetimes. So if we abused someone's trust in a previous lifetime, we may be born into this lifetime as someone whose trust will be compromised, and then go into life as adulthood not being, right. I use the example of, let's say, if an authority in your childhood rejected you or failed you in some way, as an adult, you may have trust issues. Those trust issues are the balancing mechanism for the trust that you abused in a previous lifetime. So that's a unique tikkun. Not everybody has, and not that it's a unusual tikkun, but it's not everybody's tikkun. Some people who have a tikkun with validation, right? And yes, it's a basic human need to feel seen and heard and valued. But if you have a tikkun with validation and an authority figure in your life, doesn't matter if you're a child or you're 50, if an authority figure dismisses you or invalidates your emotions, you can go into this stage, this mode of emotional rebellion, right? Which externally you may be compliant, but internally you're raging like you did when you were a teenager, or even just resentment, right? That mild resentment that builds up when we feel dismissed or unseen or unheard over and over and over again. Again, it's a unique tikkun, validation. Not everybody has it. But if that's you, the recognition, and the reason I started with this is because we're going to go back to it over and over and over again for the next, 10, 15 minutes we have left, is that ultimate authority, the light of the creator, is where we want, that's who we want to feel seen and heard and valued by. We really don't want to seek validation. And again, I'm speaking mostly to people whose tikkun this is, but you may have milder, moments of feeling like this is your tikkun. We're not here for validation or acceptance or acknowledgement or recognition from anything outside of us. So according to Kabbalah, the light of the creator is not sitting on a throne millions of miles up in the sky. There is a spark of the light of the creator that resides within me. And that's why the work we talked about last week, self-acceptance, self-love, self-worth, is so important, is because when we feel loved and worthy and accepted from within, we don't need anything externally. That's being the cause. That's being the co-creator. So that's another tikkun that can come up with authority. I think another one, and this is maybe more universal than the first two, is that fear of vulnerability. For some people who have a particular tikkun with it, submitting to authority, and that doesn't mean allowing someone to walk all over you. It just means accepting that there's somebody in a position of greater experience, greater knowledge, or greater power than you, right? If you're an employee in a company, the person above you and the person above them and the person above them have more power in the company. That doesn't mean they have more power on the planet. It just means that in that role, they're in charge, they're the authority. Submitting to authority, acknowledging that they are in a position of power, may feel like giving up emotional control. And giving up emotional control can feel very scary, especially if it's part of your tikkun, and in the past you associate vulnerability with being hurt or manipulated. So rather than, and this is the mild guidance, we'll get to the more direct advice for this week later on, really being open to other people's experience, guidance, wisdom, direction, not as an exercise in submission, but as an exercise in allowing yourself to receive messages from the light of the Creator. Unfortunately, the universe does not send out text messages or users manuals for life. The communication mechanism of the universe is really through other people. And that's one of the reasons that this conversation is so challenging and can be so triggering, is because usually the people who push our buttons, we dismiss as non-messengers. I'm willing to hear feedback from everybody except for the people I don't want to hear feedback from. And it's often the people I don't want feedback from that have the most valuable feedback. So that, I think, is the emotional piece, which is so very much tied into personal tikkun. And obviously we could talk hours about personal tikkun, and we do in our courses, but recognizing that not everybody's issue with authority is the same. Now, the spiritual piece, which again, we could probably talk for hours about, is that when on a spiritual journey, it's also really difficult, or I think it presents itself as a challenge to receive guidance and wisdom and truth from other individuals, right? Of course, we know that the light of the Creator is with each individual, and we all have that inner compass, that our soul that is constantly guiding us and directing us in the light direction. But there's always going to be, and I think this exists in every spiritual teaching, is that external authority, if we're not putting ourselves in a place of openness, or again, really looking at our experience as I'm open to receive from anyone and anything, is that sometimes spiritual external authority can seem like it's trying to define or control your journey. And at least that's something that I try very hard not to. I don't ever want to sound like that. Here's my experience. Here are the teachings. I'm the messenger, or as my husband often says, I don't make the pizza, I just deliver it, right? That to not confuse a spiritual teaching with law, let's put it that way. When somebody tells you, spiritually speaking, it would be good to do this, or it's not recommended to do that, you still have that inner compass, that soul within you that you have to check with. And I think we talk about this almost every week. If what you're hearing is not in alignment, you also have to check, is that non-alignment because my ego is uncomfortable, or is that non-alignment because it really doesn't align with my soul? And when you tune in and use your intuition or your inner voice as more of a consistent tool, you will know when an external authority is out of alignment with you. And I don't think that you should only use your inner voice to check on external authority, but the more habitual, the more accustomed you are to using your intuition to guide you, the more clarity you will have on, is this the book I should read? Is this a teacher I should take a class with? Is this a path for me to follow? And to not be afraid to question that. That's right. This week's episode is called Challenging Authority, because even Moses himself questioned, God, I'm not the right one. God, why me? I can't speak. I'm not a good orator. My older brother, he's more experienced. He's more, has more of a commanding presence. Why not him? So many examples of Moses challenging God. So we're not here to roll over and play dead or be submissive. We're here to chew on the guidance that we receive from an authority and see if when we digest it, that it's good for our system. And I think especially when people embark on a spiritual journey, there is this worry that we'll lose ourselves, that we'll become a sheep in the flock. And of course, it can, if done in an imbalanced way, surrendering to authority can feel like you're surrendering your individuality, your identity, or your purpose, but that's not really what spirituality is about. And I think if there is a part of your spiritual journey or your personal journey that it requires you to surrender your individuality or your identity to any group or authority, that's a red flag. The individuality, and this is something really beautiful that comes from the writings of Rav Ashlag. He calls it the law of unique individuality, that because there is only one God, and because we were created not only by the light of the Creator, but we are each a spark of the light of the Creator, we all have this desire to be unique individuals. We desire to be like the Creator, and one of the qualities of the Creator is that there is only one, and there is only one like the Creator, right? There's no other creators. So that quest to be unique, it's actually a disservice to the universe, to creation, if you don't embrace your unique individuality and seek to express it, not to try to be one of the flock. Right? Don't assimilate into being something you're not for the sake of belonging, is basically the short the short answer for that. But really what this week's episode is about is that both accepting and challenging authority, when, again, listen to the first half of the episode if I wasn't clear before, if you didn't get it before, when that authority is aligned with our values, our soul, when that authority is, I know we didn't talk about it, but it's important that authority is also humble and kind. And, again, we could be talking about accounting. You're looking for a CPA, and we could be having this conversation. It's not only in spiritual work. There is a spiritual value for accepting, challenging, and welcoming authority. And they may say accepting and challenging are not in conflict, right? When you have a teacher in school, and maybe this works a little bit more in college or even a little bit in high school, when you have a teacher in school who's teaching you, a professor, let's say, or a teacher, and they tell you something, even though they're maybe taught to have an authoritative air and seem like they don't want you to question. I can tell you personally from being a teacher, not only at the Kabbalah Centre, but I also used to teach 3rd and 4th grade. When a student questions what you're teaching them, as long as it's done in a respectful and curious way, it's one of the greatest joys, because it means that person is receiving it. So challenging what you're hearing, wrestling with it, is an extremely powerful thing. Questioning, that's one of the major tenets of Kabbalah. I hope I say it in the beginning of every course I teach, and I think it's in the beginning of every book at the Kabbalah Centre, is don't believe a word in this book. Use it, test it, challenge it, and only use what works for you. So there are definitely benefits to accepting reality, right? And I think this speaks to, I think it speaks to different parts of our, evolution or maturation as individuals, all of which and I know I said this in the beginning, I'm going to repeat it again, all of which are really there to help us embrace the highest authority, which is the Creator. So, for example, we're born, we have caregivers who are often our parents, sometimes other adults, and there is a reason that honor your father and mother is in the top 10 recommendations, the 10 commandments, because in learning to honor our parents or our caregivers, we are learning to honor the light of the Creator. We may not have a direct acknowledgement when we're 4 years old of that force, but it's teaching us to embrace, welcome, accept, and also challenge authority. Same thing with our teachers. I know I brought it up before, right? There's a beautiful saying also, I think it's in Pirkei Avot, which is another section of spiritual guidance, but very practical, where it says that, if an older person or a wise person enters the room, you should stand up for them, right? I mean, in U.S. courts, right, when a judge walks in the room, the bailiff says, please rise. It's not about respecting the individual. I mean, I don't know why we do it in a courtroom. It's not about respecting an individual. It's about learning to respect not only the Creator, God, that force itself, but also the laws, the extensions, the light, the whole system that was set up by that force. So even when you look at government, which to me, when I read what's going on in the portion about the Holy Temple or the Tabernacle and the high priests and the priests below them, and later on the judges and the heads of the tribes and all those different things, it's really teaching me that there is that hierarchy is there to help me learn how to honor and respect the laws of the universe. So whether it's a manager in the department that you work in or a first responder in your community, there's positions of power and authority on a spiritual level so that we will learn to embrace and accept, and then also sometimes challenge the ultimate authority, which is the light of the Creator. So going back to why it's important to be able to accept, and I think once you can accept, you learn that it's also possible to challenge in a respectful way said authority. Right? As children growing up, why is having a healthy family environment important? Because kids need boundaries and healthy mental and physical frameworks to learn and make sense of the world. Kids who don't grow up with that have very difficult lives. Kids who become adults, their adult lives are very difficult because they don't have the framework and the boundaries that come from a healthy childhood. It's also important to trust our caregivers, our parents, because in life, people with more experience, I think this is fact, let me know if you think I'm wrong, people with greater experience can often help us avoid unnecessary mistakes and help us grow, right? Why do you need someone to teach you to drive? Because if someone teaches you to drive, you will drive more safely than if you just get behind the wheel and see what happens. And I think also maybe this is more of a professional / spiritual commentary, but having a mentor in the areas of work in which you excel, or the areas of life in which you wish to excel, is also another form of that. I didn't bring up the word mentor yet, but being mentored by someone who has more experience than you in your field, whether it's professionally, it could be in parenting, it could be in marriage, it could be in spirituality, is really powerful as well, because there is not a journey in life that we're meant to go alone. Even though no one has our tikkun or our soul or our unique perspective, having that input and feedback from those who are further along in their experience. Again, we're not in competition with anybody in their experience, but if I've been studying physics 5 years longer than you, I've simply accumulated more hours in the field than you, I have experience that you can benefit from. And I'm always saying, when I speak to students individually, and I said this yesterday, right before a class, one of the hardest things to do in life is to surrender. right? To let go of trying to control or manage a situation. And I wish that it was enough to tell people a story about surrendering, that they would just say, okay, I'm going to surrender. But every soul's journey has a moment or two or five of surrender that they just have to go through. There's no way around it in order for you to get to your next level. And learning about how important surrender is doesn't make it any easier. The universe has to force you into it somehow. I hope it's been clear. I hope that everything we've said so far has been clear. I want you to walk away, and I want to spend the last few minutes of the episode giving you some tangible, actionable items for this week. Also mentioning that Tuesday is the new moon of Taurus. I just want to make sure that's correct on my calendar. Yes, Tuesday is the new moon of Taurus, and while that's, well, I'll pause for that for a second. If you've been listening for any period of time, if you've been with us for a month, you know that the new moon is a powerful day for planting seeds, for goal setting, for intentionally dressing for the job you want, meaning being a better version of yourself for those 24 hours helps to create an imprint for the whole month for you to be that version of yourself. So from Monday night to Tuesday night, we have that window of opportunity. The month of Taurus is a lovely month. It's called Chodesh Ziv, the month of light. But at the same time, one of the, we always talk about how the sign of the month influences us all in that month. So we all become a little Taurus in the month of Taurus. And Tauruses are the most loyal, the most loving, or one of the most loving signs. They value consistency. They're very practical. I can't say enough good things about them, but their main weakness, their Achilles heel, is their desire for comfort. So we all want to be careful this month that we are not seeking comfort. We've said it many times before, those people who are willing to be uncomfortable are usually the most comfortable people, and you can't trick the system, you can't say it, but dread discomfort on the inside. Really learning to be open, to live outside of your comfort zone is probably what keeps you from being too uncomfortable. I think also this month, it's encouraged to be flexible, to be willing to let go of things, to not belabor a point, to proactively seek opportunities to be different, to do things differently, to be open-minded to other ways of approaching problem solving or getting out of your routine. And by the way, even moving your furniture around, finding ways to maybe even just drive a different way to work, and really thinking about how to do things differently. Again, for the sake of proactively creating, getting outside of what's comfortable, what your routine is. So going back to the opportunity of this week, in thinking about this week, my recommendation is to be, first and foremost, to be really in touch deliberately and proactively with your inner compass. Because when you challenge authority, you're forced to, I think that forces you to tune into your own values, your own intuition, your own sense of truth. When we do that proactively, we eliminate the need for confrontation, right? Proactive confrontation is a great thing, and we're all a little confrontation averse. But the more deeply you dig within to awaken that inner guidance system, whether you call it your soul, your inner voice, your intuition, the more you strengthen that connection, the easier, first of all, you will be able to be guided toward the right experts, the right authorities, the right mentors and leaders, but also the more aligned you are with that inner voice, the more discernment you'll have, the more self-trust you'll have. It's really a very powerful tool that I don't think we use enough. This is also the week to check what authority in your life is based on illusion. So whether it's authority that's based on fear, which I think is the most common one. We allow people to tell us what to do, or we are afraid of the authority of certain people. Sometimes it's a control issue. It's always an ego issue. But very often it's outdated belief systems. So this is the week to look at those people in your life that you consider authoritative or expert or guides, and make sure that that alignment is there, right? We don't want to do things just because we've always done them. I think part of this process also requires us to identify where our ego is at play. Anytime we resist authority, there is always going to be some element of ego. You may ultimately decide, I'm no longer going to accept this person as an authority, but in that process, you also want to be able to not discern, but distinguish between the aspect of my soul that is driving the bus and the part of my ego that is bothered by what's happening. And I think at the end of the day, again, going back to the fact that all the hierarchy in the universe is simply there for us to get to a place of accepting that ultimate authority of the light of the Creator, is that we are meant to inspire and be inspired. We are meant to question, awaken, even shake people up, shake ourselves up to find our truth, right? So when you look at the great trailblazers of the world, they blazed those trails in questioning authority, in asking questions, in not accepting things at face value. So I feel like in any area where you've been saying, oh, it's not that important, this is bothering me, but I don't want to rock the boat. I wonder if this is, certain things, like I said before, it may have been aligned 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Is it still aligned with you? These are some great questions to ask this week, because while on one hand, rejection or rebellion for ego's sake not only is a waste of time, it just creates more noise and more chaos in the long run. But when you challenge authority with humility and seeking clarity and a desire for truth, it becomes an awakening for both parties. So honor that pull if you feel it, and do it with compassion, humility, and grace. And maybe the last thing I would say is take a moment today or this week to look at the authority figures in your life and show appreciation, be grateful, show gratitude, not only internally, but maybe even take the time to say, I might not always tell you, but I really value the time you spend with me, or the time you spent with me. Maybe it was 40 years ago, but I've been thinking about how influential you were for me, or all the advice you gave me, and I really appreciate it. Imagine, 10,000 of us making a phone call and telling that to another individual or two individuals. This week is going to be a very bright week for a lot of us, and it's a beautiful exercise, especially for the new moon, as we want to put more light out there in the world to create that greater allowing of the light of the Creator to flow into our lives. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow us on all those platforms to receive more content to support you on your journey. You can also visit our website, weeklyenergyboost.com. You can find more info on the things we think are important for our listeners to know about. Search our archives, send us a message, or click the donate button to support Weekly Energy Boost. But as always, the more you share the episode, or even to like, rate, review it, the more eyes get on us, the more light is revealed in the world. So we thank you for always sharing and continuing to share. And we'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.